Welcome everybody. I can see a few of you are here. This is our session on custom reports, report templates. My name is Ruben. My pronouns are they, them. Looks like a whole bunch of you who have joined are already familiar with me. What I'll do to start off with, so we'll do a little bit of housekeeping, but before we start, while we have people jumping in, I might just do a welcome to country, acknowledgement of country, very important distinction. Obviously I realize we're on a webinar format, so everyone's going to be in a different location. I'd like to acknowledge the lands of the people that where I am working today and also where I reside. So today I'm working on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I also reside on the lands of the Darug people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. In the spirit of the recent NAIDOC week, always was, always will be, and the focus on place and traditional place names, it would be excellent if everyone could post in the chat the land that they're on, if you know that yourself. So now we've got that out of the way, just a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, so if you miss something now, you can always come back to it later. We'll be posting the recording shortly after we finish, or at least sometime within the next day or two after we've completed this training session. This is going to be a pretty informal session. You'll notice if you've trawled through our class documentation, there isn't any documentation on this feature as yet. So this is really just a starting point in a conversation in terms of giving people some tools to be able to start customizing templates themselves. We've realized that the knowledge about that is fairly limited in-house, and there might be a higher appetite for people to be customizing templates than we have the ability to handle ourselves. So hopefully following this training session, we'll have a bit of documentation. But I think if you've attended one of our webinars recently, the general idea is post a question in the chat and it'll be read out at some point as I check in. I don't really have a particular agenda today. I'll go through some basics, but feel free to use the raise your hand button. If you have a microphone connected to where you are at the moment and you want to just ask a question, that might be a little bit easier for this session. I can sort of talk about it and maybe we can work through together and solve a problem. And that will hopefully sort of help guide us with where we're going. But yeah, I will go through the basics. You are welcome as well to post a question in the chat if you prefer, and we can check in and read those out as we go as well. I just thought it might be more interesting if we get a dialogue going where we can. So if there's no further issues preventing me from starting, I might get started. So some of you on this call will have already started playing with document templates and might have a basic knowledge. There are a few relatively familiar faces in terms of that kind of stuff. I will still start from the basics. So forgive me if there's some stuff that you already know about. Just to preface, There are a few recent changes that we put in over the weekend to the reports templates as part of release 7 that we'll be putting some documentation out shortly. So if something that I'm doing looks a little bit different to what your document template looks like, feel free to put in a ticket and we can sort of talk through that. But otherwise, by and large, it should be applicable across the board. So for those who don't know how to get to custom templates, maybe I'll actually start for those who are, let's step back to the very beginning. If you're not aware, custom document templates, it's a feature in class that allows you for the different types of data that we record in class to be able to get a printout for various reasons. Most commonly, that'll be a service printout template. There are default templates that are in the system. They might not do exactly what you want them to do. You might want it to capture some fields that custom fields that you've created that aren't currently captured in those fields. You might want to actually use this to draft a letter, a form letter that you might use to populate with the existing fields in class. Whatever the reason, there's a way to be able to do that. To access the custom templates, that's under the tools section of class in the bottom left-hand side. Anyone who's on this session who doesn't have access to tools, you may not have the right level of access in class. In that case, you might have to speak to your class administrator to be able to get that access. So I think typically you need to be either a class administrator or an advanced administrator to see this section of class. And it's under printout templates underneath tools. So what you can see here is just a list of the templates that we have. Don't worry about the ones like the annual target, center, budget, etc. Those are to do with accountability. Some states, they might not be relevant to you at all because your state program manager doesn't use our accountability function and you'll never see them. Either way, there's not really any point in customizing them. They're not the most useful things for customizing purposes. You're going to really be focusing on the service printout, the client printout, and the action printout. Those are the most useful ones for you. So let's look at what information we have here in this list. You can see a whole bunch of these reports are just a normal black text. So these are the ones that we created. These are the ones you can't change them, but you can create copies of them. Anything that has a hyperlink and a little symbol on the left of it, those are the ones that you've created yourselves, and those are the ones that you can do the editing on. You can see that there are two fields at the right here, which is default and active. So if a report isn't active, then you won't be able to select it as a template when you go to generate a printout. And if it is not default, or if it is default, then that will be the first template that comes up when you try and print the specific thing. So for action printout in this match to field, we'll look at this top one here, which is the default. When you go and print out an action, then this is the template that will come up first, and you'll have to go and drop down and select. So maybe let's have a look and see how that appears in the class system for those who aren't familiar with actually printing. So I'm just going to open up the service here, any old service. And I'm going to when it loads up, click on, oh, that's fine. Click on print. Straightforward. This is the, so under the select form section, reports training testing is the one that's come up first, which when we look at this list, it will say it is the default. So this is the one that I've been creating just to do a little bit of testing before this training session. And then we've got a number of other options here that we can pick. So let's pick letter to client. That will generate a different template based on the design that we've got. This is one of James's fun little templates that they created back when this feature was first put into place. All right, so we haven't gotten into looking at a design of templates yet. I just wanted to do a quick pause at this point in time because I've still managed to spill quite a lot of information out. Were there any questions at this point before I push forward? Looks like nothing as yet. So let's get into the meat and bones of this topic. So the first thing I'll say is if you don't have any custom templates and you want to create your own, there's a shiny new button here. You can see me highlighting it. Forget it exists. Doesn't work. Right now, the only way that you can build a template is to take an existing one and use the data set that's in it and then redesign it to suit your needs. So if that sort of spreadsheet style printout template that's the default of the service printout test doesn't work for you, you'll have to basically copy it and undo that, undo all of the design work, redesign it, and then add the fields back in because for whatever reason, we don't have the access to be able to design data sets from scratch in here. So I'm going to create a new template based off of the default service printout template, and I'll create another service printout template to work on for the purposes of this training session. So to do that, you just click on the template that you want to create a copy of. I would generally recommend, unless you're doing a copy of something that you've designed to make minor changes to just pick the default one that we've created and then customize it from there. So you tick the report you want to copy on the left-hand side, and then you click copy. At this point, that then creates another, let's see, where's that popped up? So what we can do, because you can see there's quite a few, here we go, that's 24th of November 2020. This created on column doesn't appear by default. I've just customized the view to add it. If you're not familiar with doing so, you can just right click on the top of any of the columns and click column chooser. You can add a couple of extra columns here if you need to. So if you've got a lot of templates and for some reason like us, you've not done a good job of renaming them, then you can add the created on column and then order it in date order and look for the most recent one if you created a new one, just to find out where it's gone. So you can see now I've ordered it by created on date descending. Here's the most recent report that's been created, which is the one I've just created now. So there's two things that you can do with templates. You can edit the metadata about the template, and you can edit the actual design of the template. They're in two separate places. So for example, you want to rename the template or set it as the default, or make it inactive or inactive, you do that by clicking on the report name. So let's call this my service template. And I wouldn't recommend making these reports the default until you're happy with them, because otherwise every time you can't make a default report for just you. It'll be default for everyone. So if you've got people printing out, if you've got an intake sheet, for example, that people tend to use most frequently, and you tick this on default so that you can test it more easily, it's going to make it default for everyone. So it might be easier to just leave it off of default until it's done. For ease of testing today, I'm going to make it the default so that when we open it, it's going to, when we try and open it in a service, it's going to come up as the default template, so we don't have to go and mess around and change them. So you can see it's renamed itself, and both of these are checked yes. To edit the template, which is the real actual meat of this training session, we just click on the little, what is it, a protractor? No, it's a set square, and a pencil icon. And it might take a little while to load your template, especially if it's a more complex one. And here it is. So we've got this grid view, and we've got a bunch of stuff on the left-hand side representing the different types of things that we can add in. You don't need to worry too much about this hamburger menu on the top left. And there's a few things on the top menu that you can look at. You can zoom in or out of the report just to get a better view, or if you've got a large report, to be able to see everything at once. You've got a preview button. It won't really give you, if you're testing to see if you've got the right field, that won't really help. You'll have to just save it and then try and print the template from a service or whatever type of entity that you're designing the template for. Don't worry about scripts here. That's for advanced logic features. I think you generally would have to have access to the actual code base to be able to properly utilize that. Validate bindings. That's just going to give you a quick check to see if everything that you've put in your design isn't going to break anything when you try and run it. And then we've got a save and we've got a close. Fairly straightforward. So there, we've talked about the layout of the design side. Let's talk about the right side here. We've got three sections on the right side here. The first thing is the properties of the specific thing that you've got selected. When you open the document, the whole document as an object is the thing that is selected. So it will give you a bit of information about the document as a whole, or the report as it's called. This is where you would change things like the page size. So if you want to make something landscape orientation, for example, that's where you would do that, is from the base of the report. So this properties, what's available here changes based on what you click on. So if I was to click on this field here, it's telling me the name of this is table cell 4. It's telling me that there's a specific field that this is bound to. So this is basically saying this is the field that we're getting. If you're not familiar with programming, you might not immediately pick up this stuff, but the more you use it, the more you'll get familiar with it. So this second option that we have here on our right side menu is the field list. So this gives us, these are all of the things, these are all of the data entities that we have. Don't worry too much about the names. Generally, you kind of just want to look at the last half of it, and it'll tell you what information you're getting. So CLS get service, it's the service. So these are the fields about the service. CLS get service action, these are the fields related to actions on a service. Additional party this is where you get all of your additional party data, so on and so forth. Anything that doesn't make sense, then generally you can open up and have a look. HRM get employee, that's generally just about the worker information. Again, you don't really need to worry too much about that. You're probably not going to really use that in your templates. You don't generally also don't need to worry about parameters. These are kind of preset. It's basically saying, so the ID, this is basically the internal service ID that belongs to the service, and that's how it uses, that's how it gathers information to join data from, to get the specific data about this service and all of the actions, parties, client, data, etc. that belongs to this service. The entity type, that's just whether it's a service, a client, an additional party, etc. Business profile ID, again, don't worry about it. That's just your firm, your center. This is just the back end way of what we call center ID, but that's always going to be locked to your center, so you don't need to worry too much about it. And the logged in user contact ID is basically, this is who's requesting this report, so that if you've got anything sort of referring to you want to print details about the person who's printing the thing, you can get that information. The last part on the right hand side here is the report explorer. So this is basically a top-down view of everything that's in this report. You can see it's a little bit complex. It's not necessarily as straightforward as looking at, putting together a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, because it's a bunch of different elements of a document linked together. So this might look a little bit overwhelming to start with. I promise you, the more you work with it, the more you'll get a feel for how this workflow works. It can still be a bit cumbersome to work with, but as long as you understand it, you should be able to, make it do what you need it to do eventually, even if it takes a little while. So you can see, if I click on report, this is the document as a whole. Again, as I said, this is sort of where what is selected when you open the template to look at, and where you control the parameters in terms of the actual page, the whole page itself. We've got, you can control the margins, the header. So there's a few things in terms of quirks about this system, about how things like headers and footers work, that we may or may not get time to get into. But that's, it sounds like there's a question in here, possibly. Unless that was my computer just making a noise. Was that a question, Alex?
Hi, Ruben. Sorry, it just took me a moment to unmute. No, that wasn't a question. It was your computer.
That's must have been my the physical laptop making a noise or something. Anyway, disregard that, let's move on. So the meat of what you're going to put into your document is going to be in this detail section. The way that each building block works is, let's open up the edit section for this. Sorry about this. Right, so I believe if we look at the report, at the very report level, it says this is where our data source is. So if we had a more sort of customizable data source implemented, we'd potentially be able to set up multiple data sources on the one report and point to multiple ones of them in that one report. So for now, we just have the one that comes when we create the copy. We want to leave that as is. By default, I think it sets a default set of data that is available in the report. So at this level, it's all of the service data. So you'll see that all of the fields here are CLS get service, CLS get service, CLS get service. Each building block of a report can only have data from one section at a time. So if you need to get, if you need to get, no, I've completely proven myself wrong on this. Sorry about that. I believe the main report has everything available to it. Why is that? There we go, it's hidden itself. But there are some items that you won't want to refer to that way. So each service is only going to have one client. Let's look at this in the way the data is brought up. So we've got service, we've got client information. These are the only two sections that there's only going to be one answer for each of these objects. So this is the meat and potatoes all here. As we scroll down, you can see that we've got these extra sections in the report. We have to do this for additional parties, for actions, and for critical dates, for example, because there is a whole list of those. So the way that we solve that is we create another detail report that exists inside of the structure of this document. So this is the detail report. We have what's called a group header, which is basically just if this goes over multiple pages, I think it'll print the same header at the top of each page. Effectively, it's kind of like looking in this sort of tabular format. It's kind of like saying this is where your column headers go, and then you've got a detail section inside of the detail report that has a this is where you put the actual fields for your action for your additional parties, and then it's basically going to give you one row for each of these things. When we look at the way the properties of the detail report, we can see it's bound to that same data source, and we can see it's got a data member of CLS get service additional party. So we're saying this section is going to give us information about the additional parties. And only the information about additional parties. We're saying there's going to be more than one response here. So let's define what's going in there, and we will add the fields that only relate to that part of this the data into there. It's the same thing for actions. You can see it's bound to CLS get service action. What I might do is set this up to as a starting point to demonstrate something that we've added into our latest version of class. You'll actually see under the data set here, we've got CLS get service conflict. So this is a new piece of information that wasn't in these report templates before. This relates to the data that shows up when you click on view conflicts from within a service. So it can be a little bit cumbersome to get some information about what your conflict check results have been if you've got a long conflict history. So one thing that we've done to help sort of make that a little bit more accessible is add those fields as something that you can put into your printout templates, because you can see here you can't actually print from this screen. So what you could do is design a custom template that gives you a conflict check history so that you can print out a conflict check audit for your service. So if we wanted to add that into this existing template, what we would do is we would go to the report and go into the properties, and we want to add in a new detail report band. That's going to add something to the bottom of this report. You can see it doesn't have a group header in it by default. We want it to have a group header, so we click on detail report and we can see insert group header band here. So the options up the top here, you see change depending on what kind of thing you've clicked on. So if I was to click on a cell in a table, this is all about adding rows, columns, or cells, all of these. So if I wanted to add a row below where I am in this table, I could do that using this button. But for what we want to do here, we want to add a group header band. And then what we can do is we can create, in fact, I think, what I don't think we can do is copy and paste, which is incredibly frustrating. So this is one of the things that you will come to learn about this system. A lot of things that are intuitive about a lot of document design systems, they don't exist here. This system is called Devexpress Reports. It's mostly built for reports rather than designed formatted documents. So it's probably, this is the same engine that drives our standard reports. So you know, it's basically not something for you to, that's really there for designing something on the fly. It's something that you use to set up something once and then just leave it. So let's recreate what's sitting here down below. So this is a basic way of starting things. So you can see I've clicked on this. This is a label. So let's find label, and let's drag a label in this group header. And we'll call it conflict check. And let's resize that just to fit in this whole size here. And then we want to make it look the same way. So let's click on this label, see how it's designed. So we've got Calibri Light, size 13, points, bold, and then we've got a RGB value for the color. So let's try and replicate that here. Bold, and what have we got? 0, 48, 86, 1. All right, there we go. So we've got a line here that separates this. You can see that there's a border down the bottom here as well. And that's also been set up to be the same color. So we can then add that border. And just check that there's no difference in the width of those. That's looking about right. So we've got our label set up that tells us what this section is about. And then what we want to do is we want to grab a table. So you can see this kind of looks a little bit like a grid. Anytime you want to add tables, then we can do that way. Let's drag that down to the bottom. And we want to look and see what kind of fields we want to use out of CLS get service conflict. So this is where we set up our headers. Obviously, this is not where we drag our data as yet. So I want to see how many columns I want to add here. So we've got conflict detail created by created date time 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've got 9 columns here. Just for brevity, I'm going to pick 4 of them and just show you how you might how you would add that extra detail here. So let's click on this last cell and go into properties. And we want to add a column to the right. So we've got, you can see that there's a line and a plus on this icon here. That's insert column to the right. You can see this is insert column to the left because the line is on the left. The ones that have an X on it is saying to delete that cell. And then the ones with the line, vertical line is to delete a column. Horizontal line is to delete a row. So let's add a row to the right. The default behavior for this is it'll actually just split the cell that you're in and put it into 2. That can get a little bit unwieldy when you start with 3 columns and you want to create 20. But what we can do here is we can drag this so that it, all right, let me just undo that. You'll see sometimes you might accidentally end up dragging the wrong thing, but you can always just use the undo button up here. I don't think your undo and redo keyboard shortcuts actually work with this, unfortunately. But what we can do is we can go back into our report explorer, look at the hierarchy, and click on the table that cell belongs to. Go back to the properties, and we have this distribute columns evenly option. So we might decide later down the track that doesn't actually work with what we want, but let's do that for now. And we want to, I believe, if you want to format the text in a table, it's best to do it at the table level. So let's make this bold to fit with how we've designed the other tables. So let's click on bold here. Let's just see if there's any difference. So we've got size 11 bold. So that's the main difference there. Let's go back to our table here. Size 11, sorry, that's the wrong way. And that makes sense. So I'll just pick my 4 fields that I'm going to throw in. Let's do created by created on search criteria result type. And then what we'll do is just move this table. So if we can click on it, we can use the arrow keys to move it up and down. We just want to move it to the closest that it can get to this label, just to fit the existing design before it gets overlapped by the label above it. And then we can make it a little bit bigger. That looks like it's close to what we've done. If you want to really get down to the nitty-gritty, you can actually go and navigate into this table. And then, or you can look at we can look at this table and we can actually see, the size. So this is 25 high. So let's make sure, let's make it consistent and make this column, sorry, this is the one that we wanted. So this is 25 high. You can see that this is actually grayed out because I've clicked into a cell. So we can't make one cell of a row higher than or narrower than any other cell. That's why that's grayed out. So let's have a look and see where we're at. This is 26.04. So we're not accurate here. Let's make this 25. Now that's consistent. We can drag up our group header and it won't let you go further than the highest or lowest thing in that particular section of the document. So you can just keep dragging it up and down and you can see it's just stopped where it's reached the lowest point of something that's actually in there. That's fine, it's a nice little touch here. And that's the header setup. You can see I've put a little bit of time into it and we haven't gotten super far. So this is something that really highlights that it might take a little bit of time to get to where you want. But if you've got the time, you can absolutely get there. So let's add some fields in. One thing that I've actually realized I've forgotten is that I haven't actually bound this yet. So let's do that. So we click on our detail report, data source, data member. Annoyingly, it's a little bit squished, so you just have to wait and hover over until you see what you want. CLS get service conflict because it's the conflict data that we want. So we've done that binding. So now when we add these fields in, so we're just going to add another table in. We'll follow the same rough structure of, let's add a new column. Let's drag this all the way to the right, and let's look at the table and make sure that that is 25 height. It is 25 height. Let's make sure that that fits the formatting. So 11 point, not bold or anything like that. So table 18 is 11 point. And then to add fields, you go into your field list and, oh, sorry, what I missed out on doing was making these even, so that should line up. You can see there's a little bit of hangover on the right here, so it's not 100%. Again, if you wanted to, you could just change the numbers to make it fit, and then everything will line up perfectly. This is close enough for what we want to do right here. So to add a field, you just click the field, drag it into the cell that you want to, or the field. So you might use some other objects here. Most of the ones that you're going to use are a label. So if you want a label to dynamically display, a label effectively is just the equivalent of a text box in Word. So if you just want something to show the value of a field, you don't want it in a particular grid format, you can just grab a label, and then you've got the table. If you want something a bit more detailed, then so if you've got like your notes on your action and you want to print those out, then you might want to put that in a panel or something like that. Or a rich text, that's probably the most likely candidate. And if you've got a checkbox field, we actually do have a representation for that. I'll get to that. But let's drag our fields in. Created date time is going to go into created on. Search criteria, result type. And let's just resize this so that it doesn't take up more space than we need to. So let's have a look and see how that works. Let's actually make sure that there is a conflict on this service. Okay, we can see that there is one, there's only one. That's fine, it'll only give us one result. So let's print this service and we'll have a look and see the data actually show up in here. It's on another page. So here's our conflict check data. You can see we've got the name of the person who did the conflict check, when they did it, what search criteria that they used, and what the result of the conflict check was. So that's to do with when you have conflict check notes switched on, it'll record what type of result it was, whether it's new client, conflict. There's a few custom options that you can set up. Obviously, there are other fields. I just sorry about that. I've got a help desk call coming in. Let me just sign out of the queue so I don't get distracted by that. So we've got some information here. You can see actually it does look a little bit different. So it looks like this is set up to add some borders to these tables. So we can potentially improve our design to match a little bit better. we can, so let's have a look and see what we missed out here, just to go and very quickly touch on that. So we can see the borders are all selected here. So that's what we're missing. And we can see that the RGB border color is effectively black. So let's add that to our other tables here. Now, interestingly, we've done that, and it's matches exactly, but it has a black border, whereas this one doesn't. I think this is a little quirk, so I believe there is a way around it. That might be something that we won't waste too much time on in this report, on this training session. You will be able to figure out just by playing around with it a little bit. So let's just leave this little section here. We've covered creating a new section to report on something that's not there. We've covered some basic design aspects and some common items that you'll need to use. What we haven't covered is different types of fields and how they might represent. So let's say we've got a custom checkbox, and we want to, well, actually, here's an option here. We might want to, let's take a look at, okay, so we've got Aboriginal, we've got Torres Strait Islander. Let's pretend these don't exist. Let's say that we want to create representations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander status in checkbox form. So maybe before I go ahead with that, I might just press pause and see if there are any other questions at this point in time. Anyone feel free to raise your hand.
No questions have come through, Ruben, but we do have
like
a hand up from Joshua.
Yeah, let's go, Joshua.
Hi,
You
how's
should
it
be
going?
able to unmute yourself. There you
You able
go.
to hear me?
Yes, indeed, I can.
Beautiful. How about accessing custom fields that you've set up?
All right, let's, so your custom fields, so I'm looking at a client, I don't think we've got any custom client fields, so that's not showing up here. But if you have a look here, we've got, so any custom field that you have created will show up under, so on your service report, it'll be under CLS get service, and they'll start off with CF underscore, and then it's generally just the name of the field with a underscore replacing spaces in the field name, or underscore replacing any invalid character for these names. So you can see we've got quite a number of custom fields sitting here. You can use those exactly the same as you would any other field. So yeah, if it's just a normal text field, it'll behave like a normal text field. If it's a date field, it'll behave the same way as a date field will behave. If it's a checkbox, it'll behave like a checkbox. If you have a multiple choice field with multiple answers allowed, then it's a little bit more complicated. And I might circle back around to that. I just wanted to cover another feature of this, which is creating calculated fields. So calculated fields help us where we've got something that we want to refer to in a number of places. In fact, I'll go back to this CLS get client. So like I said, go back to this scenario here where we don't have, we haven't got the smarts to already see whether someone is just Aboriginal or just Torres Strait Islander or both. We've just got the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander status, which is yes Aboriginal, yes Torres Strait Islander, both Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, or no or not recorded. We don't really care about those responses. We want to represent what various categories of indigeneity a person has on this template. So what we can do is we can create a calculated field that uses some logic to answer the question, and then we can use that to help us populate some checkboxes. So let's add a calculated field. I didn't test this beforehand, so I'll be figuring out with you. So let's call this is an original. So we want to, if we're creating logic, we generally want to use the Boolean field type. So Boolean is true or false, if you're not familiar with those terminologies. So this is where we start getting into a little bit of loose code. If you're familiar with formulas in Excel, this will be kind of similar to that. We might just, we'll basically build a basic logical if statement. So we want to go, we want to test the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander status. The way this works, let's bring up, sorry, operators. So it kind of, if you start typing in this if, it will tell you how it works in terms of the formatting. So the first part of it is the expression, i.e. what do you want to evaluate? So we want to go, if the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander status is yes Aboriginal, we want to return that as true. And if we don't, we want it to be false. So if Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander status equals yes Aboriginal, true, false. So it's basic formula here. So it's if open bracket, your expression. It'll let you, there's some, if you're not sure what the field name is, you can look at your field lists here, and let's just say this isn't in here. Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, double click it, it throws it in there. Let's actually check our operators here. So I've already made a mistake. So the operators are how you compare two things. The ones that we're interested in here for an if statement. So we want to look at equals equals. This might be a little bit too much detail, but I had just the equal symbol before. Some programming languages let you use a more simple way of evaluating that. So, or it might even, some languages even say, just put the word equals and it will be able to read that. Equals equals is kind of another standard way of saying is equal to, where often just the single equals symbol in that programming language is just saying assign a value, assign the thing on the left, so assign the thing on the right to the thing on the left. So we would be saying with a single equal symbol, although it wouldn't work, is Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander status is yes Aboriginal. We're not asking if it is equal to this. So just remember equals equals. If you want to use if statements, that's what you want to do for is equal to. The exclamation mark equals is not equal to. So if you want to evaluate something the other way around, that's what you would use. So if we want to say, if we wanted to say is Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, then we might go is not equal to yes Aboriginal, for example. That only evaluates part of the query, but it's a sort of basic example. So this is just a basic query. This tells us, this asks to evaluate, does this person have yes Aboriginal as the response for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander status field? And it will tell us yes, it will tell us true if it is, and it will tell us false if it is not. So that's basically us recreating this Aboriginal field, but we've called it is Aboriginal. So let's add a checkbox here. I'm not going to make it particularly pretty. I might have to add this in a different section. Let me delete this. If at any point in time I've said something that doesn't make any sense to you whatsoever, feel free to, again, pop a question in the chat or raise your hand, and Alex will let me know that there are some puzzled faces going on. So let's get rid of this checkbox.
Well, there is a bit of a pause. We do have a question in chat.
Excellent.
Is there something like expression editor for class reports?
Not really. So the reason why the class standard reports aren't very customizable is mainly because the data set that's in those reports is incredibly limited. It's basically designed to answer those specific questions, and it doesn't give you anything else. So there is in class no, you don't have the ability to do that. So we can ourselves on our side customize your create custom versions of these standard reports if we like, but we can only do it with the fields that they've already put in there. So we haven't really been able to do much without asking for a new report. So that's where the limitation lies in standard reports is if it's not a field that we've asked for in the report, they haven't made it available, and it's been made available in such a way that it effectively just counts it in the way that we've asked them to count it. So I would love to have a more flexible answer to that. And I've certainly tried to get everything that I can out of that system, but we've sort of gone as far as we can with that. So hopefully that's answered the question that you've asked. I feel like I have, but sorry if it's not an answer that you want to get. So let's go back to this and let's add another row here. Let's remove this text. We don't care about the text. Let's drop our checkbox in here. Original. And then all we need to do in terms of this check state, so this check state says, what are we using to determine whether this box is checked or not? So let's go to CLS get service client information, and we should have our is Aboriginal calculated field in here. And we can save that. I'm just going to go to this client. Obviously, this is just a dummy. This is our dummy system, so I can just go and change stuff at will. Obviously, don't do that in your own system. Maybe find an example that fits what you've got. If you don't have an example, you can maybe play around in our sandbox system. If you don't have access to it, let us know in the create a help desk ticket, and we can give you some access so you can play around. Unfortunately, any templates that you create in that system, you can't just copy and upload into your real database. So I would just do a really basic example if you wanted to test something, just to show that you can make it do what it needs to do, and then you can replicate that same logic in your production system. So let's save and close this client. And I'm going to print this out. And we should see this new checkbox, and you can see that it's checked. I'll just undo that, and let's change it to yes, Torres Strait Islander. Actually, let's just show how bad a job I did of creating that piece of logic here. And let's set it to both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and print. Does anyone want to guess if it's going to be checked or not yet checked? It's not checked. I probably should have left some time for you to answer. So does anyone want to have a crack at answering why this checkbox isn't checked, even though based on the answer that they've given, that they actually do fit into the category of being Aboriginal. Terry. Terry is one of our new starters. Terry's just joined us yesterday and also works part-time at the Hub Community Legal Centre in Queensland, but she's joining in and learning even more about the class system and the help desk. Terry, give us a crack about answering this question.
Well, I don't know if I'm right, but is it your if-but statement?
Yes, my if statement is wrong. Well, it's not wrong, it's just not answering that specific question. So let's just pretend that I answered this incorrectly on purpose so that I could go back and fix it. And let's try and go back and fix it. Now, the one thing I don't know about this system is how OR works. Oh, there we go, OR. And in fact, we have another way of doing this. So we have two ways of answering this question. We have two values that are appropriate for answering the question as is this person Aboriginal? We can do the long way, which is if Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander status equals yes Aboriginal, or Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander status equals both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. So this will, or basically, if we're talking about logical operators, the two most common ones are and or. And means it must meet all of the criteria to be able to say it that this is true. Or means it just has to meet one of the criteria. It looks like possibly we might have we're running low on time, but that's okay. We've actually gotten a lot further than I thought we would. Given that, full disclosure, I'm just making this up as I go along. So, and is it must be all of the things, or is it must be at least one of the things. Or doing it this way is the long form way of doing it. You can see we have to reuse the name of the field twice, and it's really long and unwieldy. So the other way that we can do it is we can actually replace these two or statements with in. And this lets us put in a list of values. And we just separate everything that's in that list by a comma. So these are this is the list of things that we want this field to check against to see whether or not this is valid. So this is effectively a shorthand way of writing out if Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander status equals yes Aboriginal or Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander status equals both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. So, barring any typographical errors, theoretically I fixed this. So let's go and test and see if that works. No. Let's just check our service and see what the actual exact wording is to see if I've gotten. Let's just copy that text and make sure that and just to be sure, I'm going to put this into a note and try and recreate it to make sure I haven't. Yep, no, that's fine. So the other option as to how that might have shown up is it might have just been the same way that the if statement works. You might have had to go in field name and then your list of options, but this is just how it works. Yes, Aboriginal and both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. I might not have saved the report. That might be what the issue was there. But that's okay. We're troubleshooting this as we go. Excellent. So now it's ticked. And then if you wanted to do it the other way, you can create another another calculated field called is Torres Strait Islander, and it effectively does exactly the same thing, except you would replace the word yes Aboriginal with yes Torres Strait Islander. Obviously, I realize again this is a redundant result because a redundant example because we actually have these split off. The system has the smarts to answer those questions separately already because we must have asked them to at some point build that into the system. But you might come up with another scenario. Another example you might look at is income level. So the way that the income level works is your specific response maps to I think high, medium, low, nil at a base result. So you might want to replicate that logic and then have a calculated field that says this is a low income client, for example. And then you would just tell it what are the ranges that are relevant for each field. So there's a number of ways that you can use that. Before I go any further, we've got about 10 minutes left. Maybe let's see if there's any more questions. I'm running out of content. Terry has a question.
Yep, we have got Terry with their hand up, and we've also had a question come in via text as well.
Okay, great.
Sorry, my hand up was an accident.
Oh, okay, no worries. All right, so let's have a look at Josh's question. Could you do 2 lines each? Hold on a sec. Could 2 lines each with the if logic for the different results in a single expression editor? Can I get a bit of information, maybe if you want to unmute yourself, Joshua, just to talk about that situation or what you're trying to achieve with that?
I'm having difficulty typing it out.
It's okay.
So in expression editor, could you on 2 lines go like if is Aboriginal equals yes Aboriginal, return true false, and then in the second line go if is Aboriginal equals a different value, return true false, or do you have to use or in?
Let's have a look and see how. So that would be something where let's see if this gives us the same result or if it actually works.
Or would it try and return true false across 2 lines?
So it's going the whole because it's a Boolean field that we're trying to go for, it's ultimately going to try and return one result of true or false. So what you might have to do if you wanted to, you might be able to do 2 if statements and then separate them with an or an and then that will evaluate to one true or false statement. So let's have a look and see if equals. But I would say that that would be a less efficient way of doing it. It might look more like, it might look easier to read though. So this is something that that is often a consideration in code, is efficiency versus readability. It's got a cross here. It doesn't look like it likes it. Oh, that might be why. So that's a little handy thing to note here is if you've got a little red X showing up on your expression editor here, it'll give you an indication about what's going wrong with it. So I'll just put this back here and show you again. So it's highlighted the exact point where it says there's a problem, and you can have a look there and see, try and figure out what's going on. It might not have the smarts to tell you about it, but at least you've got a starting point. So what I figured out here is that my syntax was wrong. This bracket didn't need to be there. The end of the if statement is actually here. So this bracket is superfluous. It's not doing anything. It's actively causing it to fail to read what it's trying to do. So we've got a little formatted expression here. Let's save that and see if it gives us the same result if we're interested in readability. Go back to the service. Let's print. And we'll want to test both scenarios, possibly even a scenario that should be false. So you can see it's actually still evaluated that correctly. Let's change on the client details the answer to yes Aboriginal, just to see if it still evaluates the second scenario correctly. Yep, it still evaluated that correctly. Let's change it to yes Torres Strait Islander and see if it unchecks it the next time we print it. Yep, so there you go. If you want it to read a little bit nicer, you might want to split it out like that. If you're like me and just want the fastest way to do it and the most efficient way to do it, then if you've got if you're evaluating a number of things at once, then just try and find the least characters to do it. Like I said, the in statement worked the best for how I saw that, because I could put a number of values to compare it to in a row. It's just a matter of preference. I don't think any of these options are going to be greatly more or less efficient in terms of the way that the system actually pulls the data. You might want to do that if you're comparing two different types of logical statements, just so that it makes a bit more sense. So, you know, if you were comparing 1 equal to and 1, you can do like as another operator. So let's sort of expand more on what our options are, just to cover the last few minutes. Let's look at logical operators. So like, we can say we want it to be, if you want to say find, actually, here's another way of answering this question. So we want to be even more efficient. We want to do like. Now I'm going to take a guess here. And add these percentage characters, which typically represent wildcards in like searches. So we're just going to look and see if the word Aboriginal exists in this field and see if that works. And let's update our client back to Aboriginal. Now, if this doesn't work, I'm just going to take these wildcard symbols out and see if it, nope, there we go. So if the way wildcard symbols work with these searches, the wildcard at the start means anything, ignore it, or if you had like and you excluded the first percentage symbol here, you would be looking for a text. Actually, yeah, let's save this and see what happens, and I can explain it very quickly. So I'm guessing that this is going to be, no, okay, interesting. Might have to play around with that. Theoretically, if the wildcards operators were working the way that that I expected them to, if you don't have a wildcard operator at the start, you should be saying, I want something that starts with the word Aboriginal but has anything else after it. If you have just a percentage sign at the start and not at the end, you want something that has the last word is Aboriginal and anything else can come before it. If you have percentage on either side, you're saying, I want to find something that just has the word Aboriginal anywhere inside this piece of text. Doesn't look like it entirely works that way, but feel free to experiment with it. But yeah, we're at 4 o'clock now. Let me just very quickly finish off what I was saying. We've got like, so you can look for a particular word. So we found a more efficient way of answering a question. And we've also got between. So this is handy for dates and for numbers. You can go So it'd be between, let's just pretend this is a number field, between 1 and 10. And then it'd look for numbers that are between 1 and 10. It is inclusive of your upper and lower bounds. So it'll include 1 and it'll include 10 based on the way this is worded here. So there's some other options on how you would do it. And again, you've also got greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or less than as other options in terms of comparing things like numbers and dates. I wouldn't really do that with text fields because it might, each system deals with that kind of thing differently. So maybe play around with it if you've got a lot of time on your hands, but maybe find another way to answer the question if you want to do it that way. So if you've got any further questions about this, I didn't get back to multiple choice, multiple select custom fields. So if you have any of those and you want to learn how to customize those, feel free to send a ticket into the help desk, and we can help show you how to do that. I didn't know how to do that myself until recently. We got a guide from the developers on how to fill in those fields. So you could then create multiple checkboxes and then use the logic to split out the result of your multiple checkboxes and check all of the relevant checkboxes that actually apply in that scenario. So yeah, feel free to send anything to the help desk. I might just very quickly before we, unless Alex is going to kill me if I don't do it now, just open up any final questions and then we'll close things off.
We do have a hand up from Terry, if you'd like to come off mute.
No, I'm sorry, I haven't. I think I might have just stuck it on there.
No worries, I'll take that down for you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, hopefully this was a good introduction to the custom templates. The next training hopefully will be a little bit more structured if you are a bit of a deer in the headlights for that one, because again, this was very much stream of consciousness, talking about what I know about this topic, and hopefully we can review this training session ourselves to get a little bit more information about how we might do it better next time. But again, anything in terms of feedback, very welcome to put it through to us on the help desk, and we can try and incorporate that feedback for the next time. So I think at this point in time, we will end the training because we've gone 3 minutes over time. But yeah, we look forward to hopefully seeing some interesting questions about customizing templates.
Thanks, Ruben, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.